Alright, the moment you've all been waiting for, but not really. So I'm going to try to convert these into geometry and just see what happens. I imagine it's going to look absolutely catastrophically terrible, but we'll figure it out. So, wow, that is a very large particle just shooting off into the distance. So what I'm going to do is go into my particle shapes, and I've not tried this before. I have no idea if this is going to work. But I'm going to go down to Output Mesh under the Particle Shape node, set this to Quad Mesh just because I like quad meshes. And what you're going to do is create, go to Modify, Convert, and Particles to Polygons. So there's not a lot of, well, there's no settings for this because they pretty much all depend on what you have set for this output mesh here. Really? What are you doing? Modify, Convert, and Particles to Polygons. There we go. So you can see it makes this real weird looking mesh here. So you can mess with the threshold depending on, how much you want this to sort of scale. There's like a bunch of weird, this basically is like a sort of extrude on your whole thing. So there's a bunch of like weird different settings you can choose for this. You can make larger triangle sizes if you want. This might be good if you want to actually smooth the mesh. But again, it really just sort of depends on, in this case, I think actually, annoyingly, triangle mesh gives me a better result. But if we let this run out, it's basically going to treat your sim as like a normal sim, but it's just going to be like a polygon at this point. So this is by no means a nice looking fluid sim, but you can do some weird kind of stuff with it. You can also go through and shade it if you want to. So this potentially can be a good way to go in and sort of, in this case I don't think the splash is working how I wanted, but you can go in and sort of like fill something with like crappy particle water if you want to. So you can also do the exact same thing for the this little additional mesh that's created, and just do, again, modify, convert, nParticle to polygons. And in this case, I probably need to mess a bit with my threshold and my blobby radius, which sounds ridiculous. But I'm going to go ahead and just assign these a new material. And this, I should note that like particles are usually pretty light computationally, but like once you start adding a giant mesh, it also needs to calculate. It gets a little weird. So I'm just going to go ahead and just be like, cool, AI standard surface shader with the preset of water, sure. And there's no lights in the scene. I'm going to save this before this explodes. So I'm going to pop a quick physical sky in here, open my render view, and just like see what happens. I imagine this is going to look really bad. Ooh, that does look really bad. Yes, the other thing that you should do if you're going to do that is, so we have these poly surfaces. Totally should go in and actually set those to be opaque in Arnold, P-surface shape, Arnold, opaque. Cool, and do that for both of them. And now we should have water that looks a little bit less crazy. Still not great. The shading, or the lighting and stuff obviously doesn't super help, but you can see that now we have this weird textured water look, and it looks pretty ridiculous, but, it kind of exists as like quick water if you need it. So I'm going to mod this a little bit, just to see sort of how this looks if I were to maybe try to fill this in a more sort of traditional way. So if you watch the other tutorials, I use the particle collision event thing, really. Okay, fine. Apparently I have to be like actually touching the particle system. Weird. Okay. Honestly, normally when I mess with the arg, ooh, that's annoying. Okay. Well, that's very good to know, I suppose. And by good to know, I mean very annoying. So it would seem, and I could be wrong about this, to be fair, this is the first time I've actually tried to do this in a kind of serious way, but it does seem like the particle event wizard thing only exists if you have actual particles in your scene and not like mesh particles. So you can mess with the emitter, you can mess with the nParticle shape 1. So this is the original stream of particles. You can mess with all of this, but it seems like it's going to give you issues trying to go back into your particle event collision thingy. Right, because it's like, choose a particle object to which to apply sprites. Wait, what am I? You specify a particle name for your event. Please check the selection. I don't know why it's not pulling up the window. Like, that's pretty weird. But it does seem like that might cause issues. So probably not a bad idea to go through if you're going to do exploding sprites and whatnot. But either way, I was actually going to not do most of that anyway. So I'll just reset this up really quick and see what happens. Great. Okay, cool. So let me get rid of all the weird extra nonsense in the scene that I clearly don't need anymore. And I will also kill the nucleus and do nParticles, create emitter. Basically just reset up the entire thing. And I'm going to treat this a little bit like where am I going with this? Sorry, I'm going to treat this like the bouncy ball pit idea. So I'm going to use self-collide, lifespan, count, they can live forever, that's fine. Particle size, come back to... So I'm going to do shading. I'm going to set these to spheres, and I probably should move my emitter up so that it's not just like in the middle of nowhere. So we have these goofy little circle-y dudes here. And what I'm going to do, I think, so this, I want this to fill a little bit faster. I'm going to go to my emitter and just set this to be, I'm just going to do a volume emitter, and for better or worse, I'm going to set this to 500 per second. Probably going to blow up my computer, but we're going to find out together. Alright, cool. So that should spawn like an absolute crap ton of particles. I think I will actually go in and I'm going to make this particle size a little bit larger, maybe like 0.4. So what I'm trying to do with this is basically get something with a tiny bit more resolution than what I had previously. Alright, and I clearly need to, I didn't do anything fancy to my nRigid, so I'm just going to go ahead and reset that up. A lot of times, if you make a particle system after creating a rigid body, sometimes it like won't pay attention to it. But what this should do is basically start filling this again with fake water, question mark. I'm going to see what happens if I add like a itty-bitty tiny bit of bounce to this. I was thinking maybe that would give you more of like a sort of splash, maybe like more of a splash animation. This will be ridiculous if you set this to 1. And you can see it's already computing a little bit slower just because it's like a bunch of particles. You can see we have a little bit of bounce, makes maybe a nice tiny bit of sad variation in there. So what I'm going to do now is the exact same thing that I just tried 10 seconds ago, where I grab the particles, go to modify, convert particles to bodies. So now we have, again, that looks really weird. That looks like crumpled up candy wrappers. But we still are able to go into the emitter and access the particle shape. And we can go down to where was it? Output mesh, again, and mess with some of these. So you can mess with blobby radius, you can mess with the triangle size. I'm gonna try to maybe make that slightly lower poly, but that's clearly not doing great. So, I mean, now it kind of just looks like raining cotton balls, but set that to quads, it apparently makes it worse. Either way. So you have a bunch of different options, but like theoretically, if we let this run for a little bit, it's going to compute way slower now because it's, again, calculating that geometry. But you can see the stream itself looks pretty awful. I think actually maybe the larger particles are kind of the way to go for this, which is a little annoying. But you can see it as sort of slowly filling this with geometry. And honestly, I think if you're going to do this, unless you have a specific reason for wanting to use particles, a fluid sim is actually way easier to set up for this and tends to look nicer. I just wanted to show you guys that this option also exists if perhaps you wanted to generate some kind of entirely insane bit of, I honestly don't even know what it's, alien goo or something. It's just like a little bit of a different effect. So I'm going to try something really quick and just maybe make the radius of these a wee bit larger. And this is probably going to explode the ever-living crap out of the sim, because suddenly all the particles are going to be clipping through each other, and I imagine this is going to do, yep, very bad things. However, if you do something like this, you know, it interestingly is now keeping a little bit more distance between the particles. The other thing that you can also try is turning off self-collide. So what this is going to do is it's basically the particles should stay sort of closer together and make a more unified mass. But you'll notice they'll do, down here, they're going to start clipping through each other in a second and just, again, make like a sort of solid blob of particles. Oh yes, I set them to be bouncy. But you notice it will be a little bit of a nicer, like the stream itself looks a little better. The only downside, again, with this is you can't really fill a container if they aren't self-colliding because they're just going to register as sitting on the floor whenever they're done. But this is an option if you, again, just need like a really quick water or something like that. And then you could theoretically try to go down and play a little bit with the geometry size here. Lobby streak radius. But yeah, so I mean, there's a bunch of different settings. And again, like this should sim way faster. But yeah, weird different options. I don't know if you'd ever actually use this, but I just kind of wanted you to be aware that it exists.